Hey guys, welcome back to the CARF L-39 Skygate build video series. If you guys have any questions, comments, make sure you list them below. I'll do my best to answer them. Also, if you have not subscribed to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below. When you hit the subscribe button, also hit the bell and you'll be notified of new videos from this build. Also, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, and thanks so much for tuning in. Okay guys, I'm kind of jumping around all over the place with what I'm doing here, but my control horn or my linkage was cured since I high salt it yesterday, so I figured I'd install it today. Basically got the servo all set up. Now I'm using the gear controller, the gear sequencer in the 28X radio. I'm not sure what the gear is going to come with as far as a controller goes from CARF. So when that gear shows up, we might use whatever sequencer comes with it. We might end up using the sequencer in the radio. I'm not quite sure yet, but regardless, I figured I'd play around with it, get it set up, and get familiar with it. So anyways, here's the nose door working. Now this is run through one of the X-bus channels right now. And yeah, so it's a little bit noisy because this is like a big drum. But and also when the gear on the L-39 is down, the gear doors are up. So there's a little socket or a little pocket back here that the gear drops into, and it's down when the gear door is closed. So when you put gear up, the door opens, gear goes up and closes. Now one of the downsides to the JR gear controller is you've only got 10 seconds delay. So you can see here the door opens, or whatever the sequence is, door opens, waits, and then door closes. So you can play around with that maximum up to 10 seconds. So it's going to really depend on how quickly this gear goes up and down if we use the controller in the radio. But here's an example of what it looks like. So this is gear up right now, and I'm going to flick the gear down switch. So door opens, gear starts going down, and gear's down, and gear door starts closing. Right? So that's gear down, and then gear up is switched now. So gear starts coming up, and gear retracts, and door closes behind the gear. So I've kind of got it timed out right now. The middle line is the nose gear door. This line is the gear sequencer itself, or gear channel. So when we initiated that, it actually worked from this side over this direction. So basically the gear door is opening, the gear is initiated to switch up at this point, and the gear door remains open for that long, and then the gear door starts closing here. So I don't know how quickly the gear is going to work, which is why I have to wait for the gear. So anyways, the door is all set up and initiated. The linkage is put on, the servo horn's put on. That servo horn's going to work great. And so that's where we're at for the nose door. One other little thing is I got the batteries kind of just temporarily mounted to the plate. I just wanted to put the Velcro on and make sure we're good there. Left a bunch of excess Velcro, so you can see here we've got a big loop left. This side comes all the way down to the end, so we can put more batteries on here. I guess also if the nose will let us, if we have enough room. But we might need to put another LiPo battery on top here to control the light system, the gear, the smoke pump. So there's gonna need to be some more batteries installed here. We might have to stick them to the side. But again, the way this is designed is when you want to charge the batteries, you just reach into the nose, you undo this bolt, and you take out the whole plate, which is great, especially if you have LiPos installed in there. So that's where we're at, guys. I think the next big step I'm going to accomplish is finishing treating all the wood inside here. We've only come up to about this point, and I still need to do the rest of the structure in the engine area, because that's going to restrict us from going any further. So I'm going to do that next, and that'll be a fairly large undertaking, but really nothing to do there other than mix epoxy and mix it with rubbing alcohol. And this time I'll be using 30-minute epoxy instead of 12-minute epoxy, so hopefully I'll get some more working time with it. So that's the next big step for this. All right, guys, so all the woodwork in the airframe has been treated now. It was quite a process just because there's so many nooks and crannies and stuff in there. You know, you have to do as much as you can from the openings here, flip the airframe upside down, get the backside of all these little nooks and crannies from the underside. So there's a lot of work on this particular plane because of all the former work. So, but it's finally done, which is awesome. Next step in the manual is the tail fairing, right? This piece here. So the thrust tube's already done. I did treat the former work, or the pieces of plywood on the turbine mounting area as well. And now the thrust tube fairing needs to go in. And so what I think is going to happen next is we're going to assemble the rear portion of the plane. So we're going to fasten the tail onto the main part of the airframe. So it's fairly straightforward, gets put in place, and then the bolts go back through the backside there. There we go. So joint fuselage. Right, let's count those. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5 in here for the rear end, and then 5 for the front end on the nose cones. But that's the hardware we're using to fasten the fuselage. Now, because the back end of this airplane is not coming apart for any travel or storage or any transit reasons or anything like that, I'm going to use Loctite on those fasteners. And so that's the next step in this process, and I'll show you guys when it's done. Okay guys, we are doing a few things here. The fuselage is joined. The servo extensions for the elevators are installed, and that is the fuselage joined together. Sorry about the mess, but there's a reason for it. So anyways, that's the that section done. Now the next thing we're doing is kind of a combination of things. So basically the thrust tube needs to be installed, but in order for the thrust tube to be installed, the elevator or rudder needs to go on, thrust tube needs to go in, then we need to measure the carbon or the fairing for the rear end. So there's kind of a lot going on right now, but I was getting the rudder ready to install and made up 2 extensions for the rudder. So we've got the 2 wires. So I just pulled the red wire out of the power box connectors. So we've got the super long extension for the light that's in the rudder, and then we've got the extension for the rudder servo itself. So those are all done. Next thing I can do is install the rudder onto the airframe, and then I'm going to route all the cables for the elevators and rudder to the front of the plane, just so they're out of the way, and that's going to be permanently done. And that's the next step. Okay guys, just a note here, in the manual it talks about when you're installing the rudder, so it talks about using a rubber grommet there. I'm going to do things a little bit differently. What we're going to do here is, because we've got 2 different wires, and just I think it's a better idea, because when this comes through I need to bunch all the wires together for the elevator servos, which sit right here. Anyway, so this is in position there. It can't move down any because of the servo connection that's right there, and this is just the wire covering that slips over the wires. So when this actually goes through, it prevents any chafing on the airframe here. Now this cover does come up to probably about here in the rudder, so it's not moving anywhere, and it deals with any any chafing issues. So that is what we're doing. Okay guys, the rear fairing is ready to install. So basically I mixed some 30-minute epoxy with micro balloons as instructed and have put it around the perimeter here. Now I'm going to set it in place and hopefully this goes well. Okay, so it's set in place right now. Fairly good for the most part. Okay, so it's partly moving it into the right spot is key. And then also try not to make an absolute mess of all this. Okay, so I pretty much have it in the right spot. I'll use some rubbing alcohol to clean this up. And then I'm going to tape it into place. All right, let's try and get this done. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. Looks like it's sitting nice and flush. There's just a small glue joint all the way around. The center molding line basically lines up relatively close with the center part of the fuselage, so that's all good. Now the last thing it talks about is filling in this area, which I don't know if this micro balloon mixture is going to work well because it's got it flows too well. So I think what I'll do is I'll probably use high sol in this area. Yeah, that's probably what I'm going to do. Alright guys, so what I did here was I actually used micro balloons and epoxy, 30-minute epoxy for this entire area. So I put a little bit more micro balloons in my mixture, did the top fillet here, and then I added a little bit more micro balloons for the side areas which had the big gaps, and that's what it looks like. So still very, very centered. Happy with that for sure. Now this pipe position, right now it's not in its final position. I think it's going to be pushed in a little bit further, but it's not bad where it's sitting. And if we come over to this side, I'm not going to touch this, but that's basically where it is right now. We have enough movement to come forward a little bit, so we're going to probably move it forward just a touch, but that is where everything is sitting. So I'm going to let this stuff dry. I'm not going to do anything until this is solid. Once it's solid, the next step is I'm going to put the rudder vertical fin back on, and then we'll probably have to pull the pipe out to get the wires mounted. We may leave the pipe where it is, but regardless, that is where we are at for the next step. Okay guys, the fairing, the rear fairing here is all installed. There it is. Went together really, really nice. Very impressed with that. There's a little bit of cleanup there I'll do with a little bit of file work, but it worked out good. Happy with everything, and went together real nice. So put the vertical back on, and haven't done the bolt up yet, but I think that's going to be the last time that it gets taken off. Pretty sure. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to mount the bell mouth bypass thing onto the turbine rails. So I'll do that with the 2 bolts and everything. And once that is done, then I will, I'm either going to do this 2 different ways. I might pull the pipe out this way, the way it was installed, because the fit is very, very tight back here. What I was thinking about doing was pushing the pipe out this way, so towards the rear of the plane, and basically there's lots of room in there to push that back, and that lets me deal with the wires and everything that are back there. All it really is dealing with the wires first, and once the wires are dealt with, then this can be permanently mounted and I can work around it for everything else. So that's where we're at right now. I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do with that, and we'll go from there. Okay guys, because the tailpipe fairing does have a little bit of space between the rear cover, I just masked this off, and I'm going to paint this black just so it's nice and well hidden. So yes, I did take the rudder off one more time, but after I painted this, it'll go back on pretty much for the last time. So, okay guys, just finished installing the blind nuts for the carbon bell mouth / bypass. So all 4 of those are installed. Fairly straightforward. It's pretty tight in there, so with the hidden blind nuts, you have to sand one side off or there's not enough space. But that's basically the install process for the bell mouth. So what I need to do now is, just while I'm here, I need to secure these hinges for the main gear doors, because right now they're just sliding. So I will secure those, and I'm gonna also finish the wire routing as well. That's kind of one big step to complete, and once that's done, then I will reinstall the pipe and get the pipe mounted for probably the last time. Okay guys, I'm just working on the wires here. So the wires that's coming from the back, I'm putting the sheeting around it. So just so you can have an idea there, brought the sheeting all the way up to where the wires all intersect, and put a zip tie around it. And then I'm going to run the wires along the carbon joint. So I'm just going to put 2 holes in the carbon joint, one near the top, one near kind of the halfway point, and then I'll zip tie the wire onto the carbon joint, and then I'll have clips that are fastened to the side of the fuselage coming down the left-hand side, and the wire is going to come to this point, and then we're going to have the strobe wire for the top come down, and then it will join into this section, and it'll also go into the next bit of wire housing. It'll all make sense when it's done. Okay guys, so the wire routing is all finished. So you can see there what I did. So basically 3 zip ties onto the carbon. There's a bit of slack on the back end, so I think if we need to take the rudder off, we'll be able to. And then we've got the wire coming down the side. So essentially what's going to happen here is the wire for the strobe up top is going to be run down this former work. I'll just zip tie it in place, and then what we'll do is it'll come into this wire loom, and this wire loom will also have some of this covering over top of it, and that covering, or the wire, is going to come inside this section here. So it's going to come through here, come down here, go underneath the tank, and then go down here underneath the tank, and then basically join into the front area here. So additionally, the wires for the wings are going to come in through this section, right? So there and on that side. So I think what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to get my wife to help me put the tailpipe back in, and then what I'll do is I'm going to high saw the tank mount in place, and because it's the end of the day, and that'll allow it sufficient time to cure for the night till tomorrow. And that's where we're at right now. Things are progressing well. Okay guys, the pipe and bypass and cone and all that stuff is mounted, bolted into place. You can see there the blind nuts are on the bottom. I have marked right there where I need to cut out the carbon bypass for the fuel lines to go through. So I need to get a rubber grommet for that tomorrow. Good old Princess Auto has all that kind of stuff. Tank is all mounted. Basically what I did is I put the base in there, got it positioned where I want it to be, and marked on the formers where the glue was not going with black Sharpie, and then put high sol all over it and glued it down. So there's a little bit of weight on top right now, just pushing it down. I did go in with a gloved hand afterwards and just kind of smooth out all the glue joints as best as I could. Obviously they're a little hard to see, but once that's cured tomorrow, we'll pop the tank out and check it out, and if we need to go back and touch anything up, we can do that once it's set in position. So that is that, and so we're gonna leave everything overnight, and that's where we're at, guys.